Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves perched on a rocky ledge beneath the Milky Way's dancing glow, wind-whispering secrets through jagged Andean peaks. You probably won't survive this Quipu decoding expedition alive, but hey, you might learn something before shivering to death, and if that doesn't intrigue you, I don't know what will. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments below. It's oddly comforting knowing fellow night owls share this peculiar obsession. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across cold stones, every footstep echoing like a hesitant heartbeat. Before you lies a length of knotted cords Quipu, coiled on a weathered rock beside a dying ember's fire. Each knot glints faintly in the dim light, sticky with the memory of coca leaves and dew. The air smells of cold earth and distant starlight. You can almost feel the Andes breathing beneath you. In your hands, those tangled strands feel alive, like history pulsing through your fingertips, urging you to unravel pretty much everything you thought you knew about ancient record-keeping. Inca artisans began weaving Quipu cords long before Machu Picchu rose in the 15th century, a mainstream historical fact that reminds us the empire's ingenuity went far beyond roads and stone walls. Some fringe enthusiasts argue Quipu even encoded songs or love poems, though that might be more fantasy than fact. Historians still argue whether certain Quipus served as mnemonic devices or even proto-writing systems. So brace yourself for a world where knots could be poetry or census data or both. As you lean in, a distant horn sounds the ghostly echo of chasqui couriers tearing across high passes at dawn. Wrapped in llama fur capes, these runners relayed Quipu messages at lightning speed, covering up to 240 kilometers per day, a testament to Inca logistical wizardry. Imagine how their hearts pounded, adrenaline surging with each step toward the next Tampu station, knowing one wrong move could plunge them off a cliff or into a cloud-choked abyss. You recall whispered tales of Quipucamayaks, the elite knot masters sworn to memory and secrecy, their eyes scanning cords like lifelines. They spoke of patterned symmetries resembling constellations, and some even scented knots with cocoa oil to preserve them an odd but charming detail. Historians still argue whether these aroma-drenched cords carried status connotations or merely masked the smell of damp rope. But either way, Quipu were as much art as accounting. In the flickering firelight, you catch yourself imagining knot patterns as spaghetti nightmares, slippery, tangled, and impossible to sort. You shake your head, chuckling quietly at your own dramatics. A lone llama munches grasses at the edge of the scene as if judging your amateur knot handling skills. Somewhere, a condor's silhouette drifts overhead, a silent spectator to your fumbling attempts. It's absurd, but that's exactly what makes this midnight adventure feel both intimate and surreal. Finally, you tug on a purple-tinged cord, feeling the satisfying snap as a knot loosens, revealing its secret, perhaps the tally of maize stores or the number of llamas delivered to Cusco's grand plazas. Remember that crackling fire and the cold wind biting at your cheeks, because these senses will tag along as we press deeper into the mountain's heart. You sense that every loosened knot brings you closer to voices of the past. And in the next section, we'll chase those echoes further down the twisting rope toward untold stories. You blink against the murky glow of embers as your fingertips trace the origins of Quipu, the Inca's ingenious knotted cord system that blossomed during the empire's rapid expansion in the early 15th century. Imagine a realm stretching from Colombia to Chile, all humming with the meticulous tally of llama's corn and human heads counted by knot. It's a mainstream historical fact that Quipu formed the backbone of Incan administration, used for census-taking and tribute records that kept Cusco's bureaucratic machine humming like a well-oiled llama bell. You run your fingers along a worn, yellowed cord, each strand dyed from local plants, some bright as cherry candy, others muted as dusk. Legend has it, Quipu evolved from simple counting devices used by Andean cultures centuries before the Inca. But it was under Pachacuti's rule that Quipu truly became an empire-wide data network. As you lean closer, you almost hear the distant murmur of accountants, well-Incan accountants, murmuring in Quechua as they sorted knot counts like modern-day spreadsheet gurus. It's kind of adorable to imagine they cursed over misdyed loops. Just like you curse autocorrect when it turns thanks into thongs. By day, Quipu strings dangled in royal tambos or roadside way stations where messengers relayed them like ancient text messages. By night, they hung in chambered halls coiled on wooden spindles beside mounds of maize husks and golden figurines. You might scoff at the idea of a pre-Columbian server room, but make no mistake, these courtyards and chambers formed a data center before silicon chips were a twinkle in anyone's eye. A quirky tidbit, some quipus were scented with llama fat or coca oil, not merely to ward off moths, but rumor has it to help the Quipucamayaks differentiate male and female llama counts by smell alone. Historians still argue whether scent differentiation ever truly functioned as data encoding or was simply an olfactory indulgence for the memory keepers. Either way, the idea that someone counted livestock by sniffing knots seems both impressive and oddly gross. You imagine the first Inca scribes, though. Scribe feels too tame, grabbing lengths of cotton and camelid wool to dye them vivid red for warriors, yellow for maize, and blue-green for precious textiles. They looped and knotted with surgical precision, mindful that each knot position represented place value units, tens, hundreds, just like our modern decimal system. That's another mainstream fact. Quipu employed a base 10 counting convention, revealing the Incas' sophisticated grasp of mathematics long before calculus showed up in your nightmares. While hushed voices debate if Quipu ever recorded dates or religious ceremonies, you can't help but marvel at how a simple knot could capture the empire's lifeblood. In a world without paper, Quipu became living ledgers flickering with color and texture instead of ink. You might poke fun noting that it makes your tangled earbuds look like a toddler's craft project. But those earbuds at least don't record how many potatoes were delivered to Potosí's silver mines. There's a scholarly debate simmering over whether the Inca ever used portability-enhancing devices like warp-weighted looms to weave Quipu into textiles, blending them seamlessly with clothing. Historians still argue whether any surviving fragments might hide woven quipu threads under decorative patterns. If proven true, your grandma's crocheted granny square might mask secret economic logs. Imagine that the next time you unplug her Wi-Fi. As the chill of night nips at your toes, you remember that quipu weren't only for cold, hard numbers. Occasionally, a quipu would feature special knots tied in 4s or 5s to mark imperial gifts like jars of chicha or shipments of coca leaves presented to newly conquered provinces. The Quipuca Mayaks would bundle these cords and escort them in ceremonial processions, their tall posture and painted faces broadcasting the empire's generosity or perhaps its obligation to newly subjugated peoples. You shift your weight, noticing the rough weave of your own cloak, probably woven by a modern loom that couldn't begin to compete with the tactile elegance of wool, dyed with cochineal insects. Quirky side note, the Inca might have even used insect-based red dyes to color certain quipu cords, adding a crunchy provenance to their data strings literally. If some lesser Quipuca Mayak accidentally munched on the cord during late-night record reviews, a gentle wind snakes through the mountain pass, untangling stray hairs from your braid, reminding you that Quipu kept up with the empire's pulse. No surprise that when Spanish conquerors first saw Quipu, they misread them as pagan voodoo relics, smashing many in ignorance. Yet a handful survived, tucked away in cool caves or secreted in monastic archives, your link to an ancient world that hungered for order without ink. You pause, tasting the faint tang of altitude in your mouth, considering how census records dictated resource distribution. If a province reported a high llama count, it earned greater food rations and military recruits. Imagine that your utility bills determined your smartphone data cap, except your cable provider doesn't gauge your loyalty by how many potted succulents you own. As you coil the cord carefully, you sense the rhythm of origins unfolding, one culture's clever innovation outgrowing simple knots to become the empire's central nervous system. In the next stretch, we'll see how those chords transformed into sacred symbolism as color and geometry imbued Quipu with social meaning far beyond mere accounting. You tighten your grip on the length of knotted cords as dawn's pink light seeps into the mountain air, revealing the true tapestry of sacred knot symbolism woven into every quipu. Each cord feels alive beneath your fingers, sturdy yet supple, and you can almost sense the stories hidden in their colors, positions, and lengths. It's a mainstream historical fact that Inca administrators assigned specific hues: crimson for warriors, gold and yellow for maize, and deep blue-green for textile to instantly convey categories of tribute and social standing. Imagine those vibrant strands swinging like banners beside temple walls, a visual code legible from across a sunlit courtyard. Your fingertips dance over a sequence of knots, climbing a thick primary cord. The highest knot cluster tilts toward a shorter subsidiary branch, signaling a highland province's elevated status and hefty llama tribute. Lower down, tighter knots on a slimmer strand mark modest offerings of potatoes from lower altitude villages. You feel the rhythm of hierarchy pulsing through the arrangement: bold, prominent chords for nobility, slender, subdued ones for commoners. Even chord length mattered. A longer pendant cord might denote a tribute collected over several months, whereas a barely 4-inch thread could imply a weekly tally. These gradations of scale rendered the Quipu an empire-wide social map, no chalkboard required. As you stare closer, you notice that some cords carry tiny loops of camelid wool dyed in muted lavender. A quirky tidbit suggests these loops were added to mark seasonal festivals, lavender, for early winter solstice rituals, though the idea remains in the realm of fringe speculation. Historians still argue whether such chromatic variation signified calendrical markers or were ornamental flourishes bestowed by individual Quipucamayaks. Either way, that soft wool loop feels like a ribbon bookmarking the empire's ceremonial calendar. Woven into this vibrant code were deeper layers of meaning. Beyond commodity categories, colors conveyed moral and cosmological associations. White symbolized purity and the snow-capped summits that crowned the Inca realm, while black cords represented the underworld where souls journeyed after death. You recall the chill of cavernous storage rooms where Quipus lay coiled on stone shelves, their cords whispering tales of life and afterlife. A mainstream fact affirms that these color conventions echoed Andean dualism, mapping the empire onto the natural world in binary oppositions, day and night, earth and sky life and death. Your hand drifts to a thick orange cord tied with clusters of double knots. Local farmers dubbed orange earth blood for its source cochineal insects that painted textiles with their carmine pigment. Rumor has it, Quipucamayaks sometimes sacrificed a few dyed threads as offerings, burying them beneath maize fields to bless the harvest. Historians still argue whether such sacrificial knots formed part of state-endorsed rituals or reflected local shamanic practices absorbed into the bureaucracy. The mere possibility of sacrificial thread gives you chills, part reverence, part weird cult vibes. You lean back, imagining a grand ceremony at the Temple of the Sun, intrepid Quipucamayaks, stepping forward to unfurl massive Quipu panels, the cords catching sunlight like fiery braids. Priests chant in Quechua, while the ruler's entourage watches calculating tribute rates in real time. That spectacle might seem modern. In fact, some claim it inspired rudimentary flowcharts centuries later, but it underscores a fundamental mainstream fact Quipu were as much political theater as record-keeping tools projecting imperial power through ritualized data display. Between the primary cords, you spot slender black threads laced with tiny silver beads. An unconfirmed fringe theory suggests these beads indicated tribute paid in mined silver, a precious commodity fueling the empire's wealth. No surviving Quipu bears intact beads, but Spanish chroniclers mention strings adorned with shining pebbles. Historians still argue whether these descriptions referred to Quipu embellishments or entirely separate treasure inventories. Either way, you can't help picturing glistening cords swaying in a marble corridor. Your thoughts drift to the technical precision required. Quipucamayaks measured knot spacing to millimeter accuracy, ensuring each cord spoke volumes at a glance. That meticulous spacing served a practical function. Clusters of 3 evenly spaced knots denoted hundreds, while groups of 9 tight loops meant 9 units. These positional values replicated a base 10 system astonishingly similar to modern place value. It's a quirky tidbit that some Quipu even featured zero represented by an empty space where a knot should be suggesting the Inca grasped the concept of nothingness long before it permeated Europe. As you untangle a faded green cord, you notice how the cord's material changes, subtly soft alpaca wool near the top, sturdy llama hair toward the bottom. Some believe this switch signified a change in tribute-type wool versus meat, though no Quipu has survived to confirm, and historians still argue whether material variation served as an extra data channel or resulted from resource shortages. That uncertainty adds a human touch. Maybe a Quipu Kamayok ran out of wool one day and improvised forever, altering the Quipu's intended message. Beneath your touch, one cord bristles with tiny offshoots like a vine, sprouting buds, each offshoot tied with a single knot. A fringe proposition holds that these offshoots represented clan lineages, mapping family trees within provincial tribute records. If true Quipu would blend census data with genealogy, creating a living family atlas. However, mainstream consensus remains skeptical. No documentary evidence ties offshoot knots to kinship structures. Yet the image of cords as ancestral vines winds through your mind, intertwining bureaucracy with bloodlines in a way that feels downright poetic. You pause and inhale the crisp mountain air, tasting hints of petrichor from last night's drizzle. Memories of earlier sections flicker, those daring chasqui messengers, the scented llamas, and you realize how cord symbolism underpinned every aspect of imperial life. A single color shift could determine if your village received extra maize rations or was conscripted for labor on new terraces. That power imbued Quipu with sacred weight. They spoke not just of grain, but of survival, loyalty, and cosmic order. In the distance, a condor's cry pierces the dawn silence, and you tighten your hold on the Quipu, feeling its weight in both material and meaning. You wonder if anyone today truly comprehends the full spectrum of symbolism encoded in those knots. The notion that such a tactile, flexible medium could carry layers of political, social, and spiritual data still amazes you. As the pink sky deepens to orange, you sense that sacred knot symbolism was more than practical. It was a way to weave the empire's soul into every civic transaction. You brush a strand across your cheek, imagining it as a story whispered across generations. Ahead, Section 4 waits, and you'll sprint alongside those legendary chasqui couriers, feeling wind in your face and Quipu cords flapping like victory flags. You push off from a lichen-crusted boulder and sprint down a narrow trail, adrenaline crackling through your veins like sparks from a blacksmith's hammer. The wind whips your hair into your eyes, and every gasp of air tastes like excitement and thin mountain altitude. You're no chasqui, but in this moment, you channel their legendary speed, imagining yourself as one of those Inca messengers racing Quipu messages across vertiginous Andean passes. It's a mainstream historical fact that chasqui couriers ran as far as 240 kilometers in a single day, handing off Quipu at Royal Tambo's relay station so efficiently that the empire communicated faster than some modern postal services. You probably can't outrun your neighbor's Roomba. But tonight, you're part of the Inca Express. Your boots pound the earth in a staccato rhythm, bouncing across uneven stones and muddy patches. At each tambo, a fresh runner waits poised like an athlete at the starting line, Quipu baton in hand. You picture the scene a network of over 2,000 way stations spanning the spine of the Andes, each wooden structure echoing with the panting breaths of approaching couriers. A fringe insight suggests some tambos doubled as ritual centers where runners performed a quick coca leaf blessing before continuing a notion that lingers in the boundary between myth and recorded lore. Historians still argue whether such rituals were widespread or limited to elite routes servicing the emperor's own correspondence. You seize the cord drenched in maroon dye, representing specialist warriors, and immediately feel its weight both physical and symbolic. One misstep could send you tumbling down a slope, and right now the trail is slick with last night's drizzle. You glance at the cliff's edge where a single miscalculated stride would leave you dangling like a rag doll off a rope bridge. It's absurd and slightly tempting, but you force your focus back to the task delivering this cord intact to the next tambo. As you run, you recall a quirky anecdote. Chasqui sometimes carried small baskets of coca leaves to chew mid-route, warding off exhaustion and frostbite. Legend says one messenger, in a caffeine-fueled frenzy, tried to eat the Quipu too, mistaking its dyed fibers for edible delicacies, an embarrassing moment that became a cautionary tale among Quipu Kamayaks. Historians still argue whether that story ever happened or was simply an instructive fable to discourage tampering with the sacred knots. Either way, the image of someone munching on a data bundle feels like a slapstick comedy sketch in the high Andes. Your lungs burn as you crest a steep incline, and the vista rewards you with snow-capped peaks shimmering in dawn's early light. Below, a valley glimmers with terraced fields, each step carved by Inca engineers centuries ago. You remind yourself that every quipu you carry dictated how much labor went into those terraces. 3 knots here for earth, moving 5 knots there for irrigation channel construction. Feel free to laugh at the notion that the Inca were ancient project managers, but they were nothing if not organized. You fling the quipu forward to your waiting teammate, who snatches it mid-stride without breaking their own momentum. There's no pause, no panting. We're not in a slow-motion action movie, just a fluid exchange as seamless as passing a baton in an Olympic relay. That's another mainstream fact. The chasqui system was so finely tuned that it resembled an ancient version of FedEx, minus the late fees, but with a higher risk of altitude sickness. You sprint on heart, hammering a tribal beat until mist closes in like a ghostly veil. Suddenly, you stumble over a protruding rock, and the quipu slithers from your grasp, unraveling a knot or two. Panic spikes, but you catch the cord mid-air, muttering a terse apology to the spirits of the mountain. You can practically hear the condor overhead chuckle at your clumsiness. No shame in admitting you temporarily forgot modern hazards still exist, like twisted ankles and gravity's unrelenting pull. Halfway through, you cross a roaring glacier-fed stream via a narrow log footbridge. The water churns far below a steely torrent that looks ready to swallow you whole. You grip the handrail frantically, quipu cord wrapped around your wrist for extra safety, because the last thing you need is to be the butt of another legend, the chasqui who fell into the stream and came out counting trout instead of goats. Historians still argue whether any chasqui perished this way or if it was embellished over time. Either way, you're more careful when crossing slow, deliberate steps. Eyes fixed ahead, heart thudding like a ceremonial drum. On the other side, frost glittering on tufts of grass. You notice talismans carved from llama bone, tied to a nearby tree, offered by runners to salute Pachamama, the Earth Mother. A fringe theory posits that some chasqui believed these offerings ensured safe passage, an intimate blend of practical superstition and empire-scale efficiency. Historians still argue whether the state endorsed such practices or quietly tolerated regional variations. You touch one talisman, sending a prickle of ancient magic through your fingertips, then sprint onward. 40 kilometers later, you arrive at your final destination, a lofty tambo perched on a jagged ridge, its wooden beams groaning under the weight of fresh snow. The innocuous hut seems impossible after the relentless ascent, but inside firelight dances across walls lined with stored quipu coils awaiting dispatch. You squat by the hearth muscles trembling and take a quiet moment to unwind your breath with a hissing exhale. Your hands, sticky with damp cord, feel both triumphant and reverent. A fellow chasqui slides over a steaming bowl of quinoa soup, simple fuel that saved countless runners from starvation's edge. A quirky side note, some runners claimed that the soup's ancient recipe included a pinch of powdered yareta, a mysterious mountain herb believed to grant endurance. Historians still argue whether yareta was ever part of chasqui rations, or if it's just botanical lore. You spoon the warm broth gratefully, imagining each swallow fueling the next burst of frenzied speed. As you recline on a straw mattress for a brief rest, the quipu lies coiled beside you like a sleeping serpent. You realize these cords were more than knots on string. They were lifelines binding the empire together. You catch yourself daydreaming, what if you could whisper a secret into the knots and send it across the mountains? But for now, you savor a rare moment of calm amid the rhythmic chaos of the chasqui network. Night falls again, and you prepare for another run under a galaxy-studded sky. You tug your cloak tighter and rise ready to leap back into the relay. But first, you close your eyes for a fleeting second, imagining Quipucamayox peering at your fatigued form and noting your delivery time with clinical precision. Then you stand, grips the quipu, and vanish into the cold, ready to carry the Empire's pulse to the next tambos. You jog into the dark trail quipu, swaying at your side like a sentinel. Every step cements the legacy of chasqui couriers, the Empire's backbone powered by sinew, sweat, and sacred knots. Up ahead, the flicker of another tambo fire beckons. As you run, remember those offerings to Pachamama, that last bowl of yareta-spiced soup, and the unspoken bond between runner and cord. In Section 5, you'll face the raw, untamed dangers awaiting messengers on those precipitous Andean highways. You negotiate a narrow mountain ledge as dusk settles your breath, thick puffs in the cold air, and the quipu cord tangles around your wrist like an overenthusiastic pet. Below, a sheer drop yawns like an open wound mist, coiling over jagged rocks far beneath. It's a mainstream historical fact that chasqui couriers often traversed heights exceeding 4,000 meters, where oxygen levels plunged to around 60% of sea level norms, enough to make your head spin and your legs wobble like jelly in a blender. You probably won't survive this, but hey, at least the view is killer, literally, if you take one wrong step. Your heart thunders as you inch forward, all your senses alert. The air tastes of stone and windburn. You can almost hear the mountains grumble under your soles. Out of the corner of your eye, a shadow slinks a jaguarundi, some fringe claim, though most scholars still argue whether these small wildcats ever prowled these altitudes or if the story began as a cautionary tale to keep rookie Chasqui on his toes. Either way, the idea of being stalked by a stealthy cat lends your run an extra dash of primal terror. Midway across the ledge, the rock underfoot crumbles, sending a spray of gravel tumbling into the abyss. You fling yourself forward, arms outstretched, quipu snapping taut against your knuckles. Your palms scrape against coarse stone pane, flaring briefly before adrenaline douses it in numb thrill. A quirky tidbit: some messengers tied small pouches of coca leaves around their forearms, not just for chewing, but as makeshift padding against exactly this sort of abrasion. Historians still argue whether coca-wrapped arms were standard gear or a personal innovation among daredevils craving extra protection. Above you, thunder rumbles a rumble so deep it vibrates through your bones. Storm clouds boil over the peaks, and the first icy raindrops splatter on your brow, turning into miniature daggers against your skin. It's absurd to think clothing would matter now, but your woolen tunic soaks up moisture, growing heavy and sagging, as if it too wants to abandon you. You duck beneath an overhang, press into the rock wall, and shake like a wet dog shivering between staccato raindrops. Remember that soggy tunic the next time you complain about traffic delays. You're basically in the world's deadliest subway. Lightning cleaves the sky overhead, illuminating the precipice in stark white. You glimpse the tiny bridge of woven reeds ahead, a precarious crossing over a rushing crevasse. It's a mainstream fact that some remote Inca trails featured suspension bridges made of ichu grass rebuilt annually by local communities. Those swaying strands once supported chasqui laden with quipu, their courage balancing each cord as they crossed voids that dared them to hesitate. Tonight, you face your own ghostly reed span, every plank bouncing with each breath. You step onto the bridge, gingerly feeling it sway and creak beneath your weight. Every gust of wind tilts it in unpredictable rhythms. You clutch the side ropes until your knuckles blanch. Mid-crossing, a sudden gust nearly tears the ropes from your grasp, and you tumble forward, landing chest first on the creaking planks. The bridge snaps and sways, but holds imperceptibly at first, then with a steadier bounce. You push yourself upright, heaving a ragged laugh quipu, still intact, though now decorated with a few fresh raindrop beads. As you resume running, the rain intensifies, turning the path into a slick ribbon of mud. You skid around a bend, almost wiping out, but catch yourself with a plant tuft. A quirky footnote says chasqui sometimes greased their shoes with llama fat to repel mud and water. Unpleasant, if you thought your socks already smelt bad enough. Historians still argue whether such greasy soles improved traction or simply made them slide more spectacularly. Incident reports are anecdotal at best. Ahead lies a rockslide zone, rocks the size of wagons perched precariously overhead. You freeze, listening to the whisper of shifting stone, each grain promising sudden doom. The wind whistles through narrow gaps, carrying the faint jangle of long-forgotten quipu branches buried beneath scree. You'd love to stand and admire the eerie chorus, but you're here on business. You dash past each footfall, sending echoes that might awaken slumbering boulders. Midway through, a pebble dislodges beneath your foot, and you stumble, sending a miniature avalanche hurtling downhill. You sprint faster, heart drumming in your ears, until you burst free into a safe alcove. Panting, you lean on rough stone and whisper, "Thanks for the upgrade, Inca roller coaster." The mountain seems to chuckle back its rumble, softened by rhythmic rain. You wrap the quipu cord around your hand, deliberately reminding yourself this tangled knot is the key to imperial order, far more important than your personal safety. Your cloak flaps wildly as you round a final bend, and there through waning stormlight you glimpse the flicker of lanterns from a distant tambo. Relief floods you warm as the hearth that awaits. Yet, as you sprint the last 100 meters, you recall the tunnels you must have passed, narrow passages carved into volcanic rock to shield chasqui from wind and snow. A fringe theory suggests these tunnels incorporated acoustic amplifiers, so that chasqui voices could echo warnings of approaching avalanches. Historians still argue whether any evidence of these sonic features survives, but the thought of ancient echo chambers gives you goosebumps, wrapped in dread. Bursting into the tambo's wooden vestibule, you shake off rain and mud and present the quipu to a waiting quipucamayok, whose eyes narrow as they inspect each knot. You expect praise or a grunt. Instead, you're handed a steaming cup of chicha fermented corn brew with just enough bite to revive a downed puma. You sip carefully its sweet warmth spreading through you, a reward almost as satisfying as surviving the mountain's trial by storm. Settling by the fire, you press your wet cloak against the logs, watching sparks spiral upward. A quirky afterthought. Some quipushamayoks claim that quipu soaked in chicha aged faster the brew's acids, softening the fibers and making knots more pliable for future updates. Historians still argue whether chicha immersion was an intentional conservation tactic or just an unfortunate side effect of storage practices. Either way, you're not volunteering your precious cords for taste tests anytime soon. As you stroke the quipu, gently tying a confidence knot of your own to mark survival, you reflect on the raw, untamed hazards faced by chasqui. Avalanches, predators, thunderstorms. These weren't mere background details, but constant adversaries in the race to deliver vital data. You curl into the tambo's corner, the quipu draped across your lap, and feel the hum of ancient rhythms in your veins. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the fire's warmth and the quipu's steady presence lull your racing thoughts. Tomorrow, you'll set out again, but in this brief, flickering lull, you've earned a rare respite. Remember the jaguarundi shadow, the lightning-split sky, and that swaying grass bridge each hazard shaping the legend of the Inca messengers. Up next, Section 6 will trace the first clumsy attempts by Spanish conquistadors to decode these enigmatic knots, blending revelation and ruin in equal measure. You wake to the muffled clang of metal on stone and stagger upright, blinking against the dim lantern light. In front of you stands a tall figure draped in polished breastplate and brimmed hat, the unmistakable silhouette of a Spanish conquistador. You probably won't survive this cultural collision unscathed, but you're about to glimpse the first clumsy attempts to decode those sacred Quipu knots. So far, Quipu have been your secret mountain pulse. Now they'll meet ink and ignorance. The conquistador's boots scuff the earthen floor as he leans in, eyeing the coils in your trembling hands. It's a mainstream historical fact that early Spaniards led by Francisco Pizarro's chroniclers seized Quipu bundles in Cusco, circa 1533, hoping the knots held military intelligence. They hauled them back to Seville, confident these pagan records would guide treasure hunters to Inca gold. Instead, those cords tangled Spanish understanding almost as thoroughly as your own earbuds do on laundry day. You feel a bristle of discomfort as he coughs in your face, a mix of defeated pride and tobacco smoke. Next to him, a Franciscan friar jots Latin scribbles in a leather-bound ledger, convinced Quipu were devilish cipher scrolls. He pokes a knot with a quill as though irritating the cord might force it to confess. A quirky tidbit whispers that some friars soaked Quipu in holy water, hoping baptism would unlock divine entry points in the knots. Historians still argue whether any cleric truly believed in sacramental decoding or merely sought to cleanse objects deemed pagan. Across the room, other conquistadors compare Quipu sketches to European tally sticks, mumbling that the Inca must be primitive accountants at best. They fail to grasp color-coding knot placement or base 10 structure, conflating every string into a meaningless jumble. It's a sad irony, the empire's administrative marvel reduced to monkey puzzles in foreign eyes. You imagine modern data scientists opening your favorite spreadsheet with the same clueless expression. Despite Spanish efforts, a few basic patterns were noted. Triple knots often marked hundreds, and certain cord colors consistently aligned with agricultural produce. That much is a mainstream fact, gleaned from barely legible notes in surviving chronicles. Beyond that, Spanish records describe Quipu as incomprehensible gibberish, tied by heathens, revealing more about European biases than Incan intelligence. You swallow a wry laugh, imagining them insisting Quipu were made by mixing cats' whiskers into ropa, another fringe claim with zero evidence, yet sometimes mentioned in passing by overexcited scribes. Historians still argue whether such rumors originated from genuine misunderstanding or were embellishments aimed at sensationalizing reports back to Madrid. In a corner, you spot a stack of burned fragments, ashes of charred Quipu, scorched in zealous bonfires. Each ember of lost cord feels like a memory snuffed out. You can almost taste the acrid smoke, a harsh contrast to the mountain breeze you just fled. Remember that smell. It lingers in the retelling of conquistador cruelty. The destruction of Quipu libraries alongside idols and temples erased centuries of data in moments of fervent zeal. You press a damp cloth to a faded cord, recalling how each knot once vibrated with precise meaning, tribute quotas, census figures, temple offerings. Now those meanings slip through European fingers like sand. A fringe insight proposes that some Spaniards deliberately mistranslated Quipu records to underreport tribute funneling gold shipments into private coffers. Historians still argue whether corrupt officials manipulated Spanish Quipu interpretations, or if such schemes are later conspiratorial lore. The friar dips his quill into ink and scratches out an entire passage after miscounting knots, mumbling that Quipu mechanics defy the logical mind. He then turns to mystical analogies, equating chords with devil's ropes used in heretical magics. You stifle a groan. It's absurd that centuries of rigorous Incan mathematics are dismissed as satanic trickery. But then you remind yourself, cultural misunderstandings shine brightest under the harsh light of conquest. You lean forward, gesturing to the conquistador, and attempt simple translations, pointing to 5 knots on a yellow cord and uttering quinientos, hoping Spanish ears catch 500. He squints, tilts his head, then nods dismissively. It's a small victory, but it feels like trying to teach calculus using sock puppets. You fumble through more demonstrations, but his patience thins faster than llama wool in the rain. Night deepens, and the friar organizes a bonfire, piling harvested Quipu fragments alongside manuscripts in Quechua. You watch the fire hunger for history flames, devouring knotted chords like paper in a shredder. A fringe footnote hints that some Quipu Kamayaks purposely laced a few chords with embers, so they would self-destruct if seized, an act of quiet resistance. Historians still argue whether self-immolating Quipu ever existed, or if it's romantic lore born from Andean resilience. As the fire crackles, you sneak away with a half-burned cord clutched to your chest. The rough texture cuts your palm, but you don't care. That smoldering fragment is proof of what once was a tether to an erased knowledge. You imagine future scholars resurrecting that ember-scarred strand, running it through spectrographic scanners and 3D imaging, coaxing its secrets back into daylight. Stepping outside into the chilly night, you feel the weight of centuries pressing on you. The conquistadors failed to grasp Quipu's nuanced code, but they could not obliterate its essence completely. That ember fragment glows in your hand, a reminder that memory can smolder long after incineration attempts. You pocket the cord, vowing to shield its fragmentary wisdom. Above the Andean sky stretches infinite constellations unchanged by human folly. You sense that Quipu's story has only just begun to unfold beyond those initial Spanish blunders. In the next section, we'll meet the Quipu Kamayaks themselves, the memory keepers sworn to guard those knots and guide future generations in unraveling their encoded world. You slip back into the tambo's flickering glow, the ember-scented air wrapping around you like a familiar cloak. In the corner, a figure clad in woven brown tunics and llama fur hat sits cross-legged before a low wooden table strewn with Quipu cards. This is a Quipu Kamayak, an Incan memory keeper whose knotted strings are more than mere records. They are living archives of empire. You crouch beside them, your eyes tracing the dance of fingers that untie and retie knots with astonishing dexterity. It's a mainstream historical fact that Quipu Kamayaks underwent years of rigorous training in Cusco's temple schools, memorizing thousands of knot permutations to serve as human hard drives for bureaucratic and ceremonial needs. The Quipu Kamayaks' lips move in a whisper, reciting knot sequences as though intoning sacred mantras. You feel the rhythm under your skin like distant drums echoing through a canyon. Outside, wind rattles wooden shutters carrying the unfiltered scent of alpaca dung and wild mint, a sensory cocktail you never expected to crave. Quipu Kamayaks didn't merely read Quipu. They infused each strand with mnemonic clues, slight twists in chord orientation, or tiny variances in knot pitch that signaled nuanced data. A quirky tidbit claims some masters chewed coca leaves while reading, using the mild stimulant to sharpen their recall during long record sessions. Historians still argue whether coca use was institutionalized among Quipu Kamayaks or merely a personal hack for focus. But either way, the image of a memory keeper nodding in trance over scented strands feels both mystical and oddly relatable on Monday mornings. You lean forward as the master lifts a chord dyed deep crimson, tracing a series of triple knots. 5,000 warriors must muster at Kyolisuyo, they murmur. You imagine their fingers carving the air, painting invisible maps of troop dispositions and logistical plans. It's mind-boggling that a civilization without written text entrusted its strategic communication to human chord symbiosis. Yet Quipu Kamayaks flourished, wielding their expertise like generals of data, ensuring that information flowed seamlessly from remote provinces to Cusco's throne. A mainstream fact Quipu Kamayaks was state-appointed officials often drawn from noble lineages to ensure loyalty. Their social status paralleled that of priests, and they enjoyed privileges like special lodgings near the Sun Temple. You can almost taste the rich maize porridge they ate at dawn before forging through mountain trials. In many ways, they were the empire's librarians, historians, and accountants rolled into one, preserving everything from livestock tallies to harvest predictions. Next to you, the Quipu Kamayak unties a small knot cluster and reties it into a new formation. This branch now records the upcoming festival offering. They explain their voice so soft, you have to lean in to catch every syllable. You lean so close that you can feel the heat radiating off the warmed wool, a reminder that these chords pass through countless hands, absorbing human energy like sponges. A fringe theory suggests that some Quipu Kamayaks perfumed their quipu with coca leaf tinctures or llama musk, creating scented archives that appealed to multiple senses. Historians still argue whether scent encoding ever functioned as systematic data or if it was simply a ritualistic flourish, but you can't help imagining the thrill of sniffing a chord and instantly recalling grain shipments. Your gaze drifts to a stack of coiled quipu awaiting cataloging. Each coil is bound with colored threads indicating year and province, arranged like a coronet of silent testimonies. You run a finger along the smooth surface of a golden yellow cord and feel its slight stickiness residue from chicha used in ceremonial soakings. A quirky tidbit holds that Quipu Kamayaks practiced a nightly ritual of dipping chords in lightly fermented corn brew, believing the spirits of the mountains imbibed the brew and guided knot accuracy. Historians still argue whether chicha baths improved chord longevity or simply added an aromatic patina. Either way, it's comforting to know that even the Inca had after-work happy hours. Leaning back, you ask the Quipu Kamayak about their memory training. They smile, revealing a silver labre painted with sun glyphs. We memorize through repetition and song, they explain, gesturing to a faded mural depicting novices chanting knot sequences to flutes. It's a mainstream historical fact that Quipu apprentices spent up to a decade in temple academies reciting complex strings of knots set to music to lock details into memory. You imagine sitting cross-legged under a keka tree, humming alongside fellow trainees as knots swayed like pendulums in your hands, an ancient mnemonic device that feels prehistoric, yet eerily like today's flashcard study sessions. Outside, a stray llama bleats, reminding you of the empire's lifeblood. Quipuca Mayox recorded livestock counts so meticulously that provinces with surplus llamas earned special trade privileges. You chuckle at the thought that the Inca might have had pet llama registries. One sneezed on the emperor. Pay 5 gold weights, though that might be more legend than fact. Historians still argue the full scope of data categories in Quipu. But the consensus is clear: nothing fell outside the Quipuca Mayox purview. Suddenly, the master ties off a knot with a delicate pinch and slides the cord into a wooden chest lined with cedar. They lock it with a small carved clasp, the click echoing in the hush. This record must remain sealed until the next solstice, they say. The weight of their word settles in your chest like cold stone. You realize these masters weren't just technicians. They were custodians of destiny, weaving the empire's fate strand by strand. You rise slowly, your knees popping after hours of kneeling. Teach me one knot, you ask, heart-pounding. The Quipuca Mayox hesitates as though entrusting you with state secrets. Then with a solemn nod, they guide your trembling fingers through a basic single knot technique unit's node, they call it. You loop the cord, pinch the wool with precision, and pull. The knot forms awkwardly at first, but under the master's gentle correction, it tightens into a perfect boucle. A triumphant thrill surges through you, proof that even novices can tap into this ancient system with the right guidance. A quiet warmth spreads in your cheeks as you hold the knot like a trophy. The Quipuca Mayox smiles, then places your cord back among the others. Guard it as you would your own heart, they whisper. You tuck that humble knot into your satchel, knowing that each knot you tie carries potential power. As you step toward the tambo's entrance, you pause one last time. The firelight dances on the Quipuca Mayox focused face, and you understand how these memory keepers formed the intellectual spine of the Inca Empire, an unbroken chain of minds linking past, present, and future. Behind you, the knitted tapestry of chords seems to hum, each strand alive with promise. You step out into crisp night air, the scent of cedar still clinging to your fingers. The mountains stand silent guardians of these woven sagas. In the next section, you'll venture into the realm of fringe theories, exploring bold claims that Quipu might carry pictographic symbols and proto-writing elements, bridging knotwork and script. Keep your senses sharp and maybe stash a spare coca pouch for memory lapses just in case. You step off the tambo's warm flagstones into a moonlit courtyard Quipu, tuck safely in your satchel, and venture toward a cluster of whispering ruins where fringe theories about these knotted marvels linger like ghosts. Moonlight spills across moss-covered walls, etched with faded glyphs, an eerie invitation to explore claims that Quipu transcended mere numeric records potentially encoding pictographic symbols or proto-writing elements. You probably won't uncover definitive proof tonight, But the speculation promises thrills that no sober, dry recounting can match. At the edge of the courtyard stands a weathered stone tablet, its surface blank except for incised circles that suspiciously resemble quipu knots. Some fringe theorists propose that these carvings are an early attempt to bridge cord and stone mapping knots onto rock faces as mnemonic murals. Historians still argue whether any such glyphs relate to quipu at all, or if they're simply decorative motifs lost to time. Either way, the notion that Inca artisans might have sought permanence by etching knot forms in stone sends shivers down your spine. Imagine a world where quipu knots outlast cotton and wool immortalized in granite. Beside the tablet, a shattered ceramic sherd lies half buried in the earth. Its painted surface bears faint linear patterns and clusters of dots that some researchers boldly interpret as pictograms corresponding to quipu data categories, dots for potatoes, lines for textiles, and miniature llama silhouettes for livestock. It's a quirky tidbit that one amateur archaeologist even claimed to see a tiny stylized sun marking a chord color's divine association. Historians still argue whether these painted symbols represent a parallel proto-writing system, or if they're just coincidental patterns born of potter's whim. You run your fingers along the shard's jagged edge and wonder what stories it truly holds. You crouch low, pulling out your satchel's half-burned quipu fragment and laying it next to the sherd. In the firelight, the cord's charred fibers cast shadows that flicker like ghostly script against the pottery. Fringe enthusiasts believe that the char pattern areas thicker from sacrificial ember treatment align with painted dots on ceramics, forming a multimedia record combining cord and clay. Historians still argue whether any surviving fragments support such acrobatic interpretations, or if it's a case of modern pattern-seeking running amok. But it's alluring to imagine quipu and pottery working in concert to capture the empire's narrative. You rise and pace between ruined columns, recalling that some 20th century researchers argued quipu could represent phonetic syllables, enabling the Inca to write names and messages. They theorized that knots, shapes, long loops, tight hitches, and figure-8 bends mapped to vocal sounds in Quechua. It's a fringe theory that sounds like an ancient version of Morse code crossed with knitting patterns. Historians still argue whether the Inca ever intended quipu to mimic spoken language or strictly used them for quantitative data. Yet the possibility that you could whisper, "I love you" into a knot and have someone across the valley hear it centuries later gives you goosebumps. In the center of the courtyard, a circle of standing stones forms a crude amphitheater. Researchers once claimed it served as a teaching ground where Quipuca Mayaks illustrated knot symbol correspondences on slates. According to the legend, learners would place cords across stone grooves, matching knotted patterns to carved symbols, blending tactile and visual cues. Historians still argue whether this amphitheater ever existed or was a Victorian imagination fueled by Romanticism. You can almost hear the echoes of chanting novices drumming chords against stone, memorizing data through multi-sensory reinforcement. Leaning against a column, you examine faint petroglyphs, twisted lines, and hooked grooves that resemble elongated quipu branches. Fringe advocates suggest these carvings depict entire Quipu layouts, a kind of ancient blueprint for lost chord bundles. They imagine that by aligning stones and drawing air knots, Inca leaders could preview Quipu before commissioning actual strings. Historians still argue whether any carvings intentionally reference Quipu, or if the similarities are simply pareidolia at work. You trace a hooked groove with your fingertip, feeling a subtle warmth as if the stone itself remembers those long-gone recitals. You light a small torch, illuminating a concealed alcove where more sherds lie stacked beneath collapsed beams. Here, you find faint charcoal inscriptions hinting at ink-based annotations alongside Quipu. A fringe footnote mentions that one sherd bore the word Kaido, possibly the name Sito, a chasqui runner honored for a record-breaking relay run. Historians still argue whether that word is Quechua at all or a later graffiti by colonial scribes. But the idea that hand-drawn symbols and knots merged in the field to name heroes captivates your imagination. A sudden breeze stirs the torch flame, casting long shadows that twist like living cords around the courtyard. You feel as if ancient Quipuca Mayaks watch from the darkness, silently debating every fringe claim. Part of you scoffs at these theories' proof feels as elusive as the condor's feather drift. But another part thrills at the prospect that Quipu may hold secrets we've only glimpsed. After all, every hypothesis nudges us closer to unraveling the full mystery. A low chant drifts from the nearby temple ruins where descendants of Quipuca Mayaks perform ritual knot ceremonies each solstice. You slip toward the sound, arriving just in time to see modern descendants tying commemorative Quipu in honor of ancestors. These living gatherings blend historical memory with creative interpretation, weaving together fact and fringe in a tapestry of cultural revival. It's a mainstream fact that Andean communities today host Quipu festivals to celebrate this legacy, though some fringe participants display experimental designs far removed from any ancient precedent. Historians still argue how much of this revival reflects genuine tradition versus modern reinvention. You stand amid chanting voices, torchlight flickering across braided hair and colorful cords. The fringe theories swirl around you like wind through reeds half-shadows of possibility and conjecture. You clasp hands with a festival attendee who offers you a small Quipu ring 8 loops of cotton-dyed kunuku red, symbolizing community bonds. You slide it onto your finger, feeling its weight like a promise. As the chant crescendos, you recall the ruined silent whispers, etched stones, broken pottery, and flickering torchlight, converging in a crossroads of belief and inquiry. Whether Quipu ever transcended their numeric roots into pictographic or linguistic realms, the questions themselves illuminate the richness of Incan ingenuity. You tuck that Quipu ring into your pocket, a tactile reminder that history lives on in both fact and fringe. With the chanting fading to echoes, you step back into moonlit stillness, Quipu fragment and ring in hand. Your mind buzzes with possibilities. If only you could test every theory in the archaeologist's lab. But such is the nature of fringe, tantalizing, maddening, and ever enticing. Ahead lies Section 9, where you'll explore how mountain communication techniques intertwine Quipu with natural acoustics and terrain. Keep your tapes and echoes ready. The mountains have more stories to whisper. You step onto a windswept plateau at dawn where the Andean peaks form a natural amphitheater carved by epochs of shifting ice. The air here vibrates with the mountain's own resonance as if the rocks themselves are humming ancient hymns. In this hollow quipu, don't just hang from chords, they shout their messages across valleys in an acoustic ballet of chord and echo. You probably won't master these echo tricks on your first go, but tonight you'll witness how terrain and sound shaped quipu relay like a prehistoric drive-through speaker. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Inca engineers deliberately chose relay routes that maximized echo clarity, using natural rock formations like the stone walls of the Patacocha Gorge to carry sound for kilometers. Chasqui stationed at echo points would wrap quipu chords around wooden stilts, snapping knots in patterns that produced distinct percussive rhythms. These rhythmic snaps echoed off canyon walls, signaling to the next runner which tribute category was being reported, an ingenious workaround where visual line of sight failed. You crouch at the edge of a granite outcrop listening as a chasqui there lifts a thick green-dyed cord and snaps 3 rapid knots, pauses, then snaps 5 slower ones. The echoes ricochet like ghostly applause bouncing from cliff to cliff. From your vantage point, you count the reverberations, 3 quick clacks followed by 5 measured taps, recognizing that the first cluster signals 500 jars of chicha, destined for Cusco's festivals, and the latter denotes 300 llama hides bound for warrior cloaks. It's like Morse code meeting an epic drum solo. Your eardrums tingle with each ricochet, and you can't help snapping your fingers in rhythm, almost like you're at a silent disco with the mountains. A quirky tidbit floats through your mind. Some chasqui preferred to wrap chords in llama leather pouches before snapping them, creating a muffled, bass-heavy echo to differentiate military dispatches from agricultural reports. Historians still argue whether leather-dampened snapping was an official protocol or a courier's personal remix to avoid confusing echoes under stormy skies. Either way, you can't imagine trying karaoke with wet headphones. Yet here, it made perfect sense. You stand and test yourself. You tie down one end of a red and white cord to a jagged rock spike, take a deep breath, and snap a single knot. The click reverberates like a distant gunshot peeling off stone surfaces until it fades into a dozen gentle repeats. A smile tugs at your lips. If Amazon had a 2-day echo program, they'd be jealous. You adjust your position, angling the cord toward a natural boulder arch, hoping your next knot can hopscotch across. But the wind picks up, scattering the sound, and your 5th snap lands in a chaotic delay. You frown terrain matters, but so does weather. A mainstream fact bites back Inca relay routes often incorporated man-made stone echo chambers, engineered alcoves where sound pooled and magnified. At sites like Ollantaytambo, carved niches funneled echo clusters precisely to distant tambos. Engineers surveyed echo patterns during construction, ensuring that the first chord of your chord snaps would thunder across valleys. Imagine acoustic architects a millennium ago grading rock chambers for optimal data transmission. You'd think they'd invented Bluetooth by accident. Midday sun splutters through rolling clouds, and you take shade beneath a natural arch named Cuoriwai Rachina, the golden blower, where whispers travel unerringly. A fringe insight claims that chasqui would sometimes hum chants into echo chambers to accompany quipu messages, layering spoken syllables on top of knot snaps for richer semantic context. Historians still argue whether vocal annotations were ever combined with chord signals or remain a romantic embellishment conjured by early 20th century explorers. You lean forward, cupping your hands around your mouth, and issue a low hum followed by two precise knot snaps. To your delight, the echo returns your hum as a faint chorus and the snaps as a crisp reply. You nearly laugh with giddy amazement, acoustic speaker, Andean style. The plateau's surface is slick with polished stone underfoot, gleaming where centuries of wind erosion smoothed every surface. You trace the faint grooves where runners tied quipu pouches, imagining the friction marks left by countless wraps. Your nostrils flare as the breeze carries scents of sun-baked earth, wild oregano, and distant bonfires. You duck to avoid a darting Andean fox, sharp-eared curious, and probably wondering why you're snapping chords in its backyard. You remember tales of signal towers, tall poles erected on strategic hilltops, each adorned with quipu pendants that snapped in gusts, their knots clacking like wind chimes announcing seasonal changes. These towers formed a visual and auditory network guiding chasqui to the next station even when visibility vanished. That's a mainstream fax signal poles or quokkas, supplemented relay routes by broadcasting simple binary codes, open or closed loops, knots or no knots, so runners could adjust course in real time. A quirky anecdote surfaces. One colonial observer wrote that quipus tied to poles during high winds sounded like ancient maracas producing a festive rattle that disoriented enemy scouts while entertaining local villagers. Historians still argue whether these rattle towers served tactical deception or were simply impromptu childhood toys commandeered by bored messengers. Either way, you can almost imagine an Inca DJ remixing wind and chord like a primal EDM event. You trek toward another echo point, a natural amphitheater carved into volcanic tuff near the river gorge. Here, the next relay awaits the chasqui perched on a stone bench like a conductor before an audience of cliffs. You pass them, the quipu you've carried, their eyes gleaming as they inspect your knots. They test a twin snapping pattern, 2 quick snaps, pause 3 slow ones, and the stones respond with uncanny fidelity, tossing back the pattern across the ravine. You tuck the cord aside, feeling like part of an ancient communication experiment. Your throat tickles from shouting and snapping, so you take a swig from your water skin. The water tastes icy and pure, but it's a far cry from the chicha-infused brews you've sampled at Tambo's. You curl your fingers around the stub of a quipu fragment in your pocket, feeling its charred twist and remembering the lost chords destroyed by conquistadors. Hear sound and terrain resurrect messages without ink or paper, forging an ephemeral yet reliable data highway. As you prepare to depart, a sudden wind gust rattles the amphitheater, sending stray chords twisting like excited serpents. You snap your last knot, deliberately one slow, heavy press that thuds against the stone like a heartbeat. The echo sweeps back, dampened but discernible proof that even in nature's wild studio, quipu relay intertwines with the echoes of stone. You rise, shoulders tingling from the adrenaline of shaping sound and code in tandem. Behind you, the valley stretches out, a mosaic of terraced fields, snaking roads, and distant snowy peaks. You realize that quipu were more than static chords. They were dynamic instruments in a natural symphony, each snap part of an oracular performance. That performance echoed civilization's lifeblood across mountainscapes where no scribes could follow. You tuck your cords back into your satchel and step toward the next ridge, the plateau's echo fading like a final applause. Ahead lies Section 10, where you'll delve into the tragedies of lost quipus, their libraries' burned fragments scattered, and the painstaking efforts to piece together history's shredded tapestries. But for now, carry the plateau's hum in your veins and the memory of snapping chords that spoke louder than words. You step through the crumbling arch of what was once a grand quipu repository, the air thick with dust and the faint tang of charred wool. The echoes of splintering wood and crackling flames still seem to dance in the shadows, evidence of the tragic destruction that befell countless quipu libraries during the Spanish conquest. It's a mainstream historical fact that in the 1570s, Archbishop Geronimo de Loaiza ordered the burning of quipu bundles in Cusco's Central Plaza, deeming them idolatrous chords, unfit for Christian hands. You probably won't shed many tears over burnt rope, but every ember-consumed knot was a lost page in the Inca's living ledger. Your boots stir fine ash on the flagstones as you navigate rows of collapsed shelves. You imagine Quipucamayaks clutching their sacred cords, begging friars to spare even a single knot, petitions met with cold indifference and flickering torchlight. Fringe whispers suggest that some Quipucamayaks surgically removed key chords and hid them in underground caverns beneath Ollantaytambo, preserving lineage records and agricultural tallies away from conquistador fury. Historians still argue whether any of those clandestine hordes survive intact, or if the tales are simply echoes of Andean resistance legends. Either way, the notion of secret quipu vaults adds an intoxicating layer of mystery to this charred ruin. You crouch to examine a half-burned fragment wedged between two stones. Its fibers are brittle, blackened with soot, yet you can still discern the pattern of knots, 3 tight loops followed by an empty gap, then 2 looser hitches. A quirky tidbit claims that some fragments discovered in the 20th century were so well preserved that researchers could run infrared scans to recover faint dye residues, revealing color-coded data lost to the flames. Historians still argue whether infrared imaging truly deciphers original hues or simply visualizes post-burn discoloration. You hold the fragment up to the light, marveling at how even destruction cannot fully silence these knotted voices. Turning a corner, you find a collapsed alcove where dozens of quipu coils lie strewn like broken vines. You reach out gingerly, lifting one coil wrapped in faded yellow wool. In its days of glory, this cord might have recorded temple offerings of maize and chicha. Now it feels like the last survivor of a burnt regiment, its knots, whispering petitions to forgotten gods. You brush away ash, recalling that Quipucamayaks sometimes applied plant-based varnishes, resins made from the terrangel herb, to protect cords from moisture and insects. A mainstream fact notes that those protective coatings inadvertently made quipu more flammable, turning them into tinder for Spanish bonfires rather than archival treasures. A sudden breeze wafts through broken windows, stirring loose cords and swirling ash motes in a silent ballet. You sneeze, cursing the ruin's choked atmosphere, and stumble over a discarded llama hide pouch. Inside, you discover a small bundle of quipu fragments tied with a red thread, an emergency cache, perhaps hidden by a desperate keeper. You slip the fragments into your satchel, mindful of their fragility. It's hard to avoid the thought that you're now custodian of a fragmentary empire carrying its memory on trembling cotton strands. As you rise, you notice faint quipu impressions on a stone lintel indentations left when cords hung against the wall for centuries. Some scholars propose these impressions form a crude index of quipu categories, a stone-era table of contents to guide future readers. Historians still argue whether these indentations were intentional markers or merely the result of long-term cord pressure. You press your finger into a groove, imagining how a quipucamayak might have leaned close, reading knots like a braille text carved by time. You pause at the threshold, the flickering light of your torch revealing a painted mural in muted ochre and black. The mural depicts quipucamayaks in ceremonial garb handling cords before a golden sun disk. Beneath the figures, a line of Quechua script proclaims blessings for truthful record-keeping. A quirky tidbit holds that some frescoes integrated real quipu fragments into the plaster, embedding actual chords into the artwork. Historians still argue whether any surviving murals contain genuine chord fragments, or if the notion grew from misidentified plaster textures. You trace the painted knots with awe, pondering how art and function merged in Inca visual culture. You step outside into the twilight chill, the ruined repository's silhouette receding behind you. The sky bleeds deep purple, streaked with the first stars of evening. You clutch your satchel, the weight of lost history pressing against your side, and take a steadying breath. Imagine telling modern librarians that their worst fire would seem gentle compared to this torrential purge of knowledge. Yet some quipus survived fragments found in church archives. Family heirlooms secretly passed through generations, and a few intact bundles spirited away to remote Andean villages. Along a narrow path you encounter an elderly descendant of quipucamayaks, her eyes glinting with recognition as you show her the salvaged fragments. She hums a soft Quechua chant, then gently wipes soot from the cords with a piece of llama fleece. A mainstream fact confirms that today families in certain highland communities still guard ancestral quipus, using them in local festivals and ceremonial storytelling. In one village, a bundle thought lost for centuries resurfaced in 1990, sparking renewed interest in knot studies across the globe. She explains that her ancestors hid quipu in hollowed-out llama skulls, disguising them as funerary offerings to the earth. Fringe accounts claim some skulls with cords still inside were buried in sacred caves, their locations encoded only in esoteric oral verses. Historians still argue whether any llama skull storages endure, or if the story walks the line between myth and hidden reality. You feel the chill of possibility. Perhaps the next expedition will unearth a complete imperial archive beneath flowers and bones. Your guide places a hand on your shoulder, her touch warm and reassuring. We remember she whispers in soft Quechua, so that the lost may speak again. You tuck the salvaged fragments back into your pack, feeling the subtle thrum of history vibrating in your palm. The night wraps around you like a worn tapestry, each thread an echo of what once was and what might yet be. As you follow the moonlit trail back toward civilization, you carry more than fiber and ash. You bear witness to the resilience of memory against the ravages of conquest. The Quipu fragments in your satchel pulse with potential awaiting decipherment in modern labs where digital resurrection could coax data back into life. In the next section, you'll step into the labs and archives of contemporary scholars where 3D scanning, AI, and scientific sleuthing revive Quipu's silenced narratives. Keep your curiosity stoked and your scanners ready. The story of these chords is far from over. You step into a cavernous laboratory lit by soft fluorescent panels, the hushed hum of 3D scanners, and whirring fans replacing mountain winds. Quipu fragments lie arrayed on crisp white trays, each twisted chord meticulously labeled with accession numbers and date stamps. You probably won't feel the thrill of high-altitude peril here, but you'll witness the first serious breakthroughs in Quipu decipherment since the Spanish missteps of the 16th century. So lean in and brace yourself. Modern scholarship is about to breathe digital life into these ancient knots. You trail your fingertip along a pale cotton cord displayed under glass. It's a mainstream historical fact that Harvard's Gary Urton pioneered color-coded Quipu analysis in the 20th century, demonstrating that chord hues correlate statistically with specific data categories: red for male population counts, yellow for tribute, maize, green for camelid fiber production. Suddenly, those abstract palettes you once saw in candlelight become quantifiable data points on spreadsheets a mile long. Remember Urton's charts? They're the foundation for every Quipu database now humming on university servers. A scholarly debate simmers over whether color classification alone captures Quipu's full complexity. Historians still argue whether subtle dye shades like deep magenta versus pale rose denote gradations of tribute quality or simply reflect batch inconsistencies from plant-based pigments. You imagine lab assistants sniffing dye samples, trying to differentiate cochineal lots by aroma, a quirky image that makes you giggle at the thought of fine fragrance notes like slightly fermented cactus. Yet that debate underscores how vibrant and variable Inca textile arts were resisting neat lines on a modern palette. You glide past a bank of high-resolution monitors displaying 3D mesh models of Quipu knots. A technician rotates a digital cord in real time, adjusting virtual lighting to highlight microtextures only visible under oblique illumination. It's a mainstream fact that researchers now use photogrammetry and laser scanning to capture knot morphology, with sub-millimeter precision revealing twist direction, fiber grain, and wear patterns invisible to the naked eye. Suddenly, your earlier mountain flicker palette feels crude. You're in a world where each knot's curvature logs potential clues about its maker's hand pressure and even which side of the cord was outermost when tied. At a long table, a graduate student cups a fragment in gloved hands, zooming into its digital twin on a touch-sensitive display. Notice the odd double twist at the third knot. They murmur. You lean closer, seeing a tiny loop offset from the main axis, a potential outlier in the chord's place value system. A fringe suggestion posits that such anomalies might be scribe-specific signatures like data watermarks identifying individual Quipu. Historians still argue whether these twists are deliberate author marks or simply knots that slipped during tying. You tap your lip envisioning ancient accountants tagging their work like graffiti artists marking territory. In the corner, a cluster of servers hum softly, storing terabytes of Quipu scans and statistical matrices. A researcher uses machine learning algorithms to cluster similar knot patterns, hoping to reveal hidden subtypes of Quipu used exclusively for astronomical observations or religious ceremonies. It's a mainstream fact that AI can now classify Quipu chords with around 85% accuracy in distinguishing tribute records from census documents, an astonishing leap from 20th century manual coding. Yet algorithmic nuance sparks debates historians still argue whether black box models risk grafting modern biases onto ancient data, or if transparent statistical methods better honor Quipu's original logic. You wander to a whiteboard scrawled with Quechua phrases and Python pseudocode where the team grapples with tokenizing knot sequences for computational analysis. A quirky tidbit emerges. One student jokingly compared Quipu syntax to programming language, dubbing it Inca script, complete with if-then knots and for-loop looped chords. The pun elicits a collective groan, but the analogy sticks after all. Quipu did operate like a pre-Columbian code base, iterating through nodes and branching data. Historians still argue whether such computer science metaphors illuminate Quipu's structure or oversimplify an organic system rooted in human memory and material culture. You lift your gaze to a framed infographic illustrating the 7 Quipu classes identified in 21st century research census, tribute, calendrical, ceremonial, genealogical, labor tracker, and resource allocation chords. That classification scheme is a mainstream fact born of meticulous cross-referencing of Spanish chronicles, colonially held Quipu, and ethno-historical interviews with Andean elders. Yet rigid categories invite debate. Historians still argue whether Quipu categories existed as discrete types, or if Quipu served multifaceted purposes, shifting meaning contextually, like modern smartphones toggling apps. Either way, the infographic reminds you how far we've come from colonial bonfires. At the back of the lab, a tall glass cabinet displays rare Quipu fragments from church archives, bundles centuries hidden inside convent walls. You recognize the dried residue of chicha varnish on one chord, matching your memories of aroma-laced storage rooms in earlier sections. A researcher demonstrates fiber spectroscopy, isolating dye compounds to reconstruct original colors. This fragment's red likely came from cochineal knot, like they note, peering through the spectrometer's eyepiece. A quirky side nugget: early spectrometers sometimes misread soot particles from archival fires as organic pigments, prompting initial misclassifications. Historians still argue how to correct those early errors, but now data-driven pigment libraries steer the way. Your stomach rumbles, reminding you that hours have passed. You wander to a corner kitchenette where the team offers you a mug of roasting hot coca tea, modern homage to the leaf-chewing Quipucamayaks of old. The steam rises fragrant with mint and slight bitterness, awakening your senses. You wrap both hands around the mug, letting its warmth seep into your chill lab coat fingers. A mainstream fact coca tea's mild stimulant properties were historically used to combat altitude sickness and aid cognitive focus. A reminder that some traditions persist across millennia. As you sip, you overhear a session on collaborative coding. Andean scholars and foreign experts debating metadata standards for Quipu archiving. One Latin American historian asserts that chord provenance must be tied to community ownership records, ensuring local voices guide interpretations. A tech lead counters that open access databases maximize scholarly reach. Historians still argue whether global versus local stewardship best preserves Quipu epistemologies, or if a blended model honors both heritage and academic rigor. You swallow your tea thoughtfully, pondering how power dynamics shape the way we read ancient data. You wander back to the scanner room where a continuous feed mechanism gently rolls Quipu strands beneath a synchronized array of cameras. The output glows on a curved monitor, hundreds of knot images streaming like a living ticker tape. Your heart quickens as you realize that every pixel might encode a forgotten census detail or an unrecorded festival schedule. That realization ties the lab's sterile glow back to flickering temple ceremonies and storm-soaked relay runs. You pocket a USB stick loaded with scanned previews and raw data, a modern talisman bridging centuries. The lab tech gives you a conspiratorial wink. Remember that chord's odd triple twist? Keep an eye on it. You nod, mind buzzing with possibilities. These digital resurrection efforts aren't just about untangling history. They're about reviving voices long silenced by conquest and decay. You step toward the lab's exit, the echo of scanning words fading behind you. In your mind, the fragmented chords pulse with fresh potential, each byte of data a coded breath of the Inca world. Ahead lies Section 12, where Quipu's digital revival spills over into public exhibitions, VR reconstructions, and educational apps that let anyone tie virtual knots. But for now, you step into the corridor light, carrying with you the hum of machines and the vibrant echo of Quipu, brought back from the brink. You step into a cavernous museum hall where spotlights bathe glass cases filled with Quipu fragments and interactive kiosks hum with eager visitors. Virtual reality headsets hang on sleek stands waiting for you to slip them on and traverse recreated Inca tambos in immersive 3D. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Museo Capacñan in Peru launched a Quipu exhibition in 2018 featuring holographic displays that let visitors virtually untie knots without risking the fragile originals. You probably won't tidy your living room with Quipu in hand, but tonight you'll tour the cutting edge of digital revival, where chords long silent speak again through code and pixels. You approach a touchscreen table displaying a life-size 3D scan of a golden yellow Quipu chord. With a gentle swipe, you rotate the digital model, zooming into each knot's microscopic texture. A kiosk narrator explains how AI-driven pattern recognition layers data onto the scan color coding segments to reveal tribute tallies and census figures. It feels like holding the Empire's spreadsheet in your palm, except without the fear of accidentally deleting crucial rows. A quirky tidbit: early VR prototypes rendered Quipu knots as glowing neon loops, leading some tech demos to resemble sci-fi nightmares until developers dialed the saturation back to wool-authentic hues. Historians still argue whether hyper-realistic coloring risks imposing modern aesthetic biases on ancient artifacts, or whether it helps users intuitively grasp data categories. You don a VR headset and find yourself on a windswept Andean ridge at dawn. Virtual chasqui appear at your side, Quipu in hand, beckoning you to follow. You sprint past adobe tambos and across reed bridges, the VR engine replicating echo points where you hear simulated knot snaps reverberate off distant cliffs. It's a mainstream fact that archaeologists from Stanford University collaborated with Quechua speakers to record authentic environmental soundscapes for these simulations, ensuring wind gusts and llama bell clanks match recorded field audio. As you sprint virtually, you feel a gentle breeze from attached fans and experimental sensory layer that almost makes you taste thin mountain air. After your VR run, you enter a theater where a projection maps a full-size Quipu onto curved walls. A narrator's voiceover describes how 3D printing uses biodegradable filaments to recreate cord replicas, letting visitors tie their own knots without touching priceless originals. You reach out to grasp a replica strand, its woolly texture both surprising and delightful, and practice basic knotting techniques learned back at the tambo. A quirky note mentions that some educators add mild citronella oil to replicas, so museum goers don't mistake stray fibers for souvenirs. Historians still argue whether scented replicas distract from scholarly engagement or enhance multisensory learning, but you don't mind the faint lemony undertone tickling your nostrils. Next, you wander into a digital archive room where rows of touchscreens display high-resolution photographs of every known Quipu. You search by provenance, filtering by cord color or knot type, and bookmark interesting specimens to a personal study folder. It's a mainstream fact that the University of Cambridge's Quipu database houses over 2,000 catalog fragments, accessible to researchers worldwide. You smile at how you used to rummage through dusty books for references. Now you have global Quipu at your fingertips. A quirky aside, some users report spending hours chasing obscure knot patterns only to discover they'd been looking at the same cord scanned from different angles. Multiplied digital clones that make the archive feel somehow alive. At a back alcove, a roundtable discussion is in session. Andean scholars, digital humanities specialists, and software developers debate metadata standards. One Quechua researcher argues passionately for community-driven annotation, ensuring local descriptive terms accompany each digital record. A policy advocate posits that open access licensing maximizes academic reach. Historians still argue whether decentralizing Quipu metadata to community wikis risks fragmentation or fosters inclusive stewardship. You lean in intrigued by how the politics of data echo the imperial debates you've witnessed in Quipu Kamayok training. Who controls the narrative? Who holds the keys to interpretation? You exit the archive into a bright learning lab where students in VR gloves practice tying virtual Quipu on projected air cords. A touchscreen quiz prompts you to classify a series of knots. Was this triple knot cluster tribute to sun festivals or a census count of alpacas? You hesitate, recalling debates over festival markers in Section 3 and guess incorrectly. The quiz offers a gentle correction, replaying the knot snaps and chord colors in slow motion. You grin at the playful pedagogy, less punitive than a school test, but nearly as memorable. Before you leave, you stop at an interactive mural where visitors scan QR codes to tie digital quipu on a communal display. Each visitor's knot pulses as part of a collective tapestry, visualizing the museum's daily attendance in real time. Today's swarm of ties glows emerald, signaling over 500 participants, quasi-tribute to the museum's success. A quirky detail, some guests attempt to tie secret messages embedding initials or doodles into the communal quipu wall. Historians still argue whether such modern gesture-based annotations blur the line between educational tool and unsanctioned graffiti. But the project thrives on this playful subversion. You step outside quipu knowledge, buzzing in your head like an overactive algorithm. The museum's facade glints under neon-lit plazas, blending ancient stone aesthetics with sleek, contemporary design. You tuck your VR headset away, its lenses still dusted with virtual starlight. Tonight, Digital Revival has shown you how quipu pulse anew through AI 3D printing, VR simulations, and community-driven archives. But these efforts are not just about preservation. They're about reimagining connection, tying past and present in a living knot of cultural resilience. As you walk away from the illuminated hall, you feel the tug of dangling virtual cords leading you forward. The next journey awaits a personal spirit-guided odyssey through the mind of a Quipu, where emotion and memory entwine in knotwork of the soul. That's Section 13. Brace yourself for an intimate voyage beyond code and color into heart-wired archives of ancestral wisdom. You close your eyes and feel the museum's hum fade, replaced by the soft rhythm of your heartbeat pulsing through the cool night air. Suddenly, you're standing in a circular adobe hut high above the Urubamba River lantern light, flickering against rough earthen walls. A gentle voice beckons you forward, your spirit guide, the Quipu ancestor, whose threads of memory intertwine with your own. You probably won't return unchanged from this personal voyage, but as you step into the circle, prepare to navigate knotwork woven from emotion, myth, and ancestral wisdom. Your guide extends a hand, guiding you to a low wooden stool beside a coiled quipu bed. Each cord here is alive with latent energy. Cerulean for sky rituals, amber for harvest gratitude, and deep violet for ancestral reverence. It's a mainstream historical fact that quipu often captured more than material data, recording ceremonies, genealogies, and cosmological lore through layers of symbolic meaning. Remember, these chords were memory banks of the soul, not just the state. Your fingertips brush against the first chord, violet wool flecked with gold dust. The guide murmurs an incantation in Quechua, and you feel an echo of ancient footsteps in your mind. Suddenly, each knot unfurls as a memory, your great-great-grandmother plucking coca leaves at dawn, her whispered prayers for fertile fields weaving into the cord's fiber. This is the fringe-revealed dimension of Quipu mythic mnemonics, where tactile memory unlocks ancestral stories. Historians still argue whether such spiritual encodings were widespread or privately maintained within elite families. But here you live it, You follow the guide's soft chant as your hands trace a branching chord, amber-dyed and supple. With each knot, you taste sweet chicha on your tongue and hear the laughter of children dancing at the Inti Raymi festival. The knots pulse with warmth, conveying communal joy and gratitude for the sun's return. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some Quipu Mayak lineages believe certain chords could summon weather patterns when tied or untied during solstice rites. Historians still argue whether these beliefs influenced state ceremonies or were charming superstitions passed among farmers. But the sensation of wind stirring your shirt reminds you that belief can shape reality. As you move to a cerulean chord, the guide inclines their head, and you feel the resonance of mountain winds echoing in your chest. Each knot here maps constellations, the Pleiades, Orion's belt, and the Milky Way's river of stars, celestial Quipu, guiding agricultural calendars. It's a mainstream fact that Andean astronomers monitored star clusters to time planting and harvesting. Yet here, under ancestral tutelage, the knots sing a soft hum in your mind, syncing your breath to cosmic cycles. You probably won't become an astronomer tonight, but this embodied lesson tethers you to heaven's time for God. The guide gestures to a small secondary branch woven from mixed fibers, linen, alpaca, and cotton. You lean in and detect a faint herbal scent, maca root, and wild mint infused during creation. Some fringe scholars argue Quipu were intentionally scented to trigger olfactory memory pathways, enhancing recall of encoded narratives. Historians still argue whether scent formulas formed part of Quipu-making canon or remained individual artistry, but when that herbal aroma swirls around you, the hut fills with layered meaning no ink could capture. Your chest tightens as you reach for a black cord tied with clusters of heavy knots. The guide's voice lowers, and you feel a tremor of ancestral grief, memories of those lost to forced labor on colonial haciendas, voices silenced yet woven into mourning knots. This raw emotional data served as communal catharsis, a way to honor the dead when words faltered. It's a mainstream fact that Andean cultures practiced elaborate funerary rites, but these grief-laden chords bring you face to face with sorrow that transcends captions or museum labels. You pause, laying your palms across the mat of chords, and the guide places a small hand over yours. A warmth radiates through your skin, knitting your consciousness with countless Quipu who came before. In this sacred space, Quipu become bridges between eras, knitting individual lives into an uninterrupted tapestry. Historians still argue whether Quipu's spiritual dimensions ever reached state sanction or flourished chiefly in private devotional contexts. But here, doctrine dissolves into communion. As the hut's fire dims, your guide recites one final knot spell, and the chords pulse their colors, softly glowing in the dark. You inhale deeply, absorbing the hushed chorus of ancestral voices, then exhale your own memory, forever altered. In the fading glow, you realize that Quipu's deepest power lies not in data precision, but in its capacity to embody lived experience, to braid fact and feeling into unbreakable knots of identity. Your guide bows, stepping back into the shadows, and as you stand, the adobe walls dissolve into star-studded sky. You hold the mental imprint of chords as if they were real wool, each knot a heartbeat echoing through time. You feel an intimate bond, with lineages stretching beyond the empire's fall, a resonance no academic chart can quantify. You pocket this inner quipu, woven of memory and wonder, ready to carry its lessons forward. The desert hush greets you as your surroundings shift back to the museum's exit corridor headsets and holograms awaiting. Your eyes sting with grateful tears, and you brush them away, smiling at the world anew. Ahead, Section 14 will trace how Quipu's legacy echoes in modern Andean art, weaving ancient techniques into vibrant tapestries, textiles, and performances. But for now, pause with me, remember the ancestors' chant, the scented chord, and the living pulse of knotted memory. You slip back into the present, stepping onto a dusty plaza in Cusco, where the sun warms centuries-old cobblestones underfoot. Around you, vibrant tapestries hang from wooden beams, each threaded stripe glimmering with color, echoes of Quipu's knotted chords woven into contemporary memory arts. The air smells of roasted corn and candle wax from a nearby altar, a sensory reminder that Quipu's legacy pulses in today's Andean cultural identity. It's a mainstream historical fact that UNESCO recognized Andean textile traditions, including Quipu-inspired weaving, as intangible cultural heritage in 20 locais, affirming their living significance. You probably won't pursue a degree in textile anthropology tomorrow, but as you wander this plaza, prepare to witness how ancient knots inspire modern voices to carry their stories forward. Your fingertips brush across a galon, a hand-woven sash, its pattern riffing on Quipu color schemes, black for earth, white for cosmic balance, red for bloodlines, and gold for kinship. Each color band corresponds to themes you first encountered under the mountain's starry vault social hierarchy, tribute categories, and spiritual duality. A quirky tidbit services local artisans, sometimes embed small knotted loops into tapestries to honor disappearing dialects, creating language pockets that invite viewers to pause and ponder ancestral tongues. Historians still argue whether these linguistic loops constitute authentic community memory or are artistic flourishes for tourist appeal. But standing here, you sense their urgency to keep disappearing words knotted into cloth. You follow a guide into a small workshop brightened by skylights where elder weavers sit at wooden looms. One woman hums a tune as she shifts her warped threads, vibrant yellows and deep blues, while humming a melodic cadencia that sounds like memory itself. Her nimble fingers twist dyed alpaca fibers into tensile strands, echoing the tactile intimacy of Quipuca Mayak training you witnessed in Section 7. A mainstream fact affirms that many of these weavers trace their ancestry directly to Quipuca Mayaks, inheriting oral traditions that frame knots as vessels of family history. You lean in close and smell the faint aroma of eucalyptus oil applied to raw wool, a practical, quirky hack to deter moths that also harks back to ancient Quipu preserving practices. As you watch, the weaver passes you a small embroidered pouch containing dyed yarns, instructing you to knot them into a simple bracelet. You fumble, at first remembering the single knot lesson from the tambo's flickering hearth. The elder chuckles softly, saying, "You write your story in every loop." You loop the yarn, forming a small cord that mirrors Quipu methodology, feeling the soft fibers that once bore tribute and spiritual invocation. It's oddly poetic, your amateur knot now part of a communal tapestry of resilience. Beyond the workshop, A small courtyard hosts a performance where dancers circle an open fire, their masks painted with Quipu-inspired motifs, swirling loops and looping swirls around their eyes. The rhythmic beat of panpipes and bongo drums lifts the plaza's energy, creating an immersive memory ritual. A mainstream modern Andean performance troupes often incorporate Quipu symbolism in festival choreography to educate youth about ancestral knowledge. You sense each drum's pulse vibrating through the plaza, fusing your heartbeat with the ceremonial cadence of centuries past. A whimsical carnival, Barker's voice rises above the music. Come tie a knot, share your story. A table invites passers-by to add a strand to a communal Quipu installation. You tie a simple knot, representing hope for cultural revival, and step back to see dozens of colorful cords hanging like vines from a wooden frame. The chaotic array reminds you of the bustling Quipu archive in Section 12. But here, the spectrum of hues forms a living tapestry, each knot a personal vow to remember. A quirky anecdote says that one playful tourist tried to tie a knot for Wi-Fi signal strength, eliciting laughter and gentle admonishment. This cord stores your respect for tradition, not your password. Historians still argue whether public Quipu installations trivialize their sacred significance or democratize memory. But in this moment, you feel part of a collective narrative that transcends screens and scrolls. As twilight deepens, you wander into a narrow alley where street artists have painted a mural of a Quipu-shaped rainbow snaking up adobe walls. The mural's loops and twists form stylized Quechua script, a graphic romance between knot and letter. A fringe insight insists that some modern graffiti artists use Quipu motifs to protest neo-colonial land grabs, claiming our ancestors not their voices here. Historians still argue whether urban Quipu graffitis constitute authentic resistance art or urban kitsch co-opted by real estate developers for branding. You pause under the turban of neon and spray paint, feeling the tension between tradition and modernity etched into every loop. A small artisanal shop beckons its shelves lined with notebooks bound in wool covers, each stamped with Quipu diagrams on the front. Inside, a lanky youth clad in a Quipu Kamayak-inspired hat explains that these notebooks serve as modern Quipus journals, where people map personal goals using knots and colors. You flick through pages where enthusiasts tied cords to track meditation days, chores completed, or gratitude moments. A mainstream fact, some psychologists propose that knot tying rituals boost mindfulness and memory retention by engaging tactile senses and echo of Quipu-Kamayak mnemonic techniques. You try knotting a silk cord to mark your next ambition. Learn Quechua and feel the simple satisfaction of threading intention through fiber. Stepping outside again, you spot a poster for Quipu Revival Festival scheduled for Solstice Week. The festival promises workshops on digital knot tying with VR headsets, puppet shows that dramatize chasqui relay antics, and culinary events where ancestral dishes, quinoa stews, and roasted guinea pig feed both body and memory. A quirky footnote, one festival organizer joked that they needed to rent extra llamas to carry exhibition quipus across festival grounds, causing a logistical kerfuffle that became local lore. Historians still argue whether the festival's commercial aspects overshadow deeper cultural education, or if it's precisely that blend of commerce and tradition that keeps Quipu alive in public consciousness. You lean against a lamppost, rain-damp air mingling with roasted rocoto pepper scents, wondering how the spirit of Quipu travels beyond these plazas into far-flung diasporas. In a small corner cafe lit by fairy lights, a researcher scrolls through a tablet showing a global Quipu network map, points in Lima, La Paz, New York, and Tokyo, where Quipu-inspired art workshops occur. A mainstream historical fact, several universities outside Peru now offer courses on Andean data systems, prompting international interest in Quipu's mathematical elegance. You imagine a classroom in Tokyo where students tie virtual Quipu on digital tablets, feeling a tactile connection despite thousands of miles and centuries in between. Yet a lively debate persists. Historians still argue whether global Quipu reinterpretations amplify indigenous voices or risk diluting their cultural context into a novelty commodity. You sip your coca-infused hot chocolate, its bittersweet tang reminding you of every Quipu infusion you've encountered, and contemplate how Quipu resonate differently in each global setting. Across the street, a young musician strums a charango beneath a mural of condors and jagged peaks. She plucks a Quipu-like pattern into her melody, the strings echoing loops and lilt reminiscent of knot snaps in Section 9. Her lyrics speak of threads unbroken, weaving a sonic tapestry that stitches past and present. You nod along, tapping your foot, feeling the harmony between knot structure and musical cadence, evidence that Quipu's lineage echoes not just in fiber, but in soundscapes and communal rhythms. Night descends, and you step into a heated adobe theater where a shadow puppet play begins. Quipu-shaped silhouettes dance on a backlit screen, reenacting scenes of Quipu Kamayaks, teaching novices under pine-framed roofs. A fringe insight asserts that some puppet masters trace their techniques back to Inca-era storytellers who used hand shadows on cave walls to accompany Quipu recitations. Historians still argue whether any direct lineage persists or if it's a modern invention, yet as you watch, the flickering silhouettes feel timeless, ancient memory refracted through cutting-edge artistry. Finally, you return to the plaza's fountain, its water reflecting lamplight in ripples like distorted chords. You hear the gentle murmur of tourists discussing Quipu workshops and vow to revisit soon. A mainstream fact, local cooperatives sell Quipu-inspired jewelry bracelets bearing small loops for sale, and 50% of profits support indigenous education programs. It's heartening to know that while some fringe appropriation worries swirl, concrete support for communities thrives through Quipu's modern revival. You tuck your hands into your jacket pockets and feel the weight of the braided Quipu bracelet you tied earlier. It rests against your palm, like a promise to remember to learn to carry forward the pulse of knot history in every corner of your life. The plaza traffic hums around you, blending car horns with distant panpipe echoes, a modern symphony layered atop ancient motifs. As you step away toward a dimly lit alley, you summon every echo of Quipu you've encountered. Sacred symbolism, relay echoes, burned fragments, VR hallucinations, and now woven threads dancing in neon and firelight. The tapestry of time stretches before you, its knots both fixed and flowing. In the next and final section, you'll hear a whispered farewell, a preview of the wind down that will slow your pulse, soften your breathing, and let you drift from these mountains and plazas into a calm, starlit night. Prepare to release tensions, ease into gentle imagery, and walk home under a sky knotted with stars where every loop is a lullaby, coaxing you toward restful sleep. You find yourself alone on a silent mountain path as the plaza's bustle fades into memory and the last embers of twilight recede behind distant peaks. In this hushed moment, your footsteps soften on loose gravel, each crunch dissolving into the stillness. It's a mainstream historical fact that Andean nights, especially near Inca ruins, were once illuminated by flickering oil lamps and bonfires guiding travelers through the dark. A gentle reminder that pathways of light existed long before electricity. You probably won't carry an oil lamp down your city street, but as you walk this imagined highland trail, prepare for a whispered farewell that will coax you toward tranquility. The air here is cool, carrying gentle notes of pine resin and crisp mountain herbs, a sensory call to slow your heartbeat. You draw your jacket closer, the fabric rustling like distant Quipu chords stirring in the wind. A fringe tidbit murmurs that Inca ritualists believed certain mountain breezes carried ancestral messages woven into Quipu, a notion historians still argue straddles the line between poetic reverie and documented practice. Either way, you inhale deeply, letting the cool air soothe any lingering tension from your day. Your eyes adjust to starlight as you step past ancient stone walls, their rough surfaces smoothed by centuries of moonlight. You remember the Quipu impressions in the repositories, Section 10, the twisted chords rediscovered in modern labs, Section 11, and your spirit-guided odyssey, Section 13. Recalling those moments, you sense your fingers on soft wool and digital screens, your ears filled with distant echo snaps and panpipe notes. Now here in this twilight, all those sensory fragments converge in a gentle mosaic inside your mind. A soft breeze brushes your cheek, carrying the faint sweet tang of coca tea leaves, those same leaf-infused scents you sipped after VR demos. Section 12. You picture yourself wrapped in a llama fur cloak, listening to condor cries overhead, feeling safe in the embrace of mountain memory. 3 light jokes drift through your thoughts. You laugh quietly at how you nearly mistook a tuft of grass for an avalanche trigger in Section 5. You recall imagining Napa Valley sommeliers sniffing Quipu dyes in Section 11. You even grin at the tourist who tried to knot Wi-Fi signal strength in Section 14. These moments, though playful, reinforce how far you've journeyed through Quipu's many layers, intellectual, spiritual, and absurd. A lone condor silhouette glides across the night sky, its wingspan eclipsing a sliver of crescent moon for a heartbeat. You hold your breath as it drifts beyond sight, thinking of chasqui, echoes Section 9, resonating through valleys and of flames purging chords centuries ago. Section 10. That condor's quiet flight mirrors your own drifting consciousness, balancing between wakefulness and the threshold of sleep. Along the trail, you pass a small shrine of stacked stones topped with a single knotted cord, perhaps left by a passing traveler, paying respect to Quipucamayoc ancestors. You kneel to add a tiny knot of your own, tying it slowly with deliberate care, each loop tightening like a whispered vow to honor memory, to carry stories kindly, to let ancient data guide you without overwhelming your heart. A mainstream fact, travelers in Andean villages often leave small offerings, inscriptions, coins, or cord loops. at sacred fern-lined shrines to ensure safe passage and remembrance of landscape deities. You stand and brush loose pebbles from your pant cuffs, the stones clinking softly as they roll away. The hush here is so complete you can almost hear your own pulse, a gentle horseshoe of sound that zigzags between ear and heart. You think of how Quipu once recorded laborers' returns after harsh mountain work, tallying days of sweat and sacrifice, and how those same chords now guide you down this tranquil path. A fringed notion whispers that listening closely might reveal faint knot snaps embedded in wind rustles. Historians still argue whether such auditory phenomenons ever existed or if they reside in romantic myth. But the idea soothes you nonetheless. You reach a flat ledge overlooking a valley draped in moon-shadowed terraces. You settle on a stone outcropping, feeling its cool surface against your back and calves. Ahead, clouds drift across starlight, dancing like ghostly llamas grazing on darkness. You press your palms into your knees, and with each exhale, you release residual tension. Shoulders slump, jaw loosens, eyelids grow heavy as silk curtains drawn across a stage. 3 quiet jokes tease your sleepy mind. That llama hide pouch you once thought held treasure simply stored your snack. That time, you nearly snapped a knot in your own scarf during a VR demo. That whispered chant from Section 13 sent shivers down your spine like a mountain ghost tickling your ankle. These amusements float away on each exhale, leaving behind calm. The valley below radiates a delicate hush, the faint rustle of night. Creatures, a distant river's murmur, the rhythmic sigh of wind through high grasses. You recall braided strings lit by torchlight Section 8 and the shared knot you tied in Section 14, feeling them blend into a stream of gentle recollection. Now, as your breathing slows, those images soften into blurred watercolor memory landscapes of flame fiber and flicker, melting into one coherent dreamscape. A final condor cry echoes through the stillness, and you close your eyes, the sound cradling you like a lullaby. You release your last conscious thought, gratitude for ancient guardians, for living communities, for the Quipu's unbroken whisper across millennia. The mountain air cools further, brushing your cheeks with night's tender breath. You feel weightless, suspended between earth and sky history, and dream. Slowly, you rise, limbs heavy as clouds at dawn, and take a single measured step toward home. No rush, no expectation, just the ease of a body guided by memory's gentle knots. With each footfall, starlight drapes around you like a soft shawl, and with every breath you sink closer to slumber's threshold. Now carry these moments with you, the scent of cedar and chicha, the echo snaps that once cut through canyons, the woven tapestries blazing under neon, and the silent pulse of ancestral chords humming beneath your skin. The path back winds gently upward and around a bend, yet you no longer feel the terrain. You feel the Quipu's embrace. Each knot ties your spirit to quietude, each loop a promise of restful ease. As you walk, your thoughts slow to the pace of star movement, drifting like cosmic dust. The final joke, perhaps it was yours weaving dad joke knots in Section 14, fades into a contented smile that lingers on your lips. Tonight, as you slip under familiar blankets and Draw them close, let the Quipu's narrative linger in the gentle hum at the edge of sleep. Recall the mountain's pulse, the woven strings, and the condor's silent wings. Tomorrow, the world will await with noise and color. But for now, you rest cradled by history's tender loops. Your eyelids feel heavy, and the world outside slumbers under a sky sprinkled with stars. In these last moments before sleep, let your breathing soften. Each inhale a whisper, each exhale a gentle release. The mountain's hush lingers in your ears, a comforting echo of Quipu's slow unraveling. Imagine a single chord stretching before you, its loops forming a pathway of light that guides you downward into peaceful rest. Feel the warmth of a distant fire on your skin, its glow dimming like a fading lantern. The aroma of coca tea drifts through your mind, soothing like a familiar lullaby. Each sense unwinds the creak of ancient wood, the rustle of llama fleece the whisper of wind through high-altitude grasses. Allow these sensations to blend, forming a soft tapestry that tucks you in like a cherished memory. Your heartbeat slows to a steady hum, syncing with distant condor wings drifting across a midnight canvas. No urgency remains, just calm, gentle rhythm. You might recall the Quipucamayoc's guiding chant, or the echo of knot snaps bouncing off canyon walls. But now those sounds dissolve into a harmonized murmur, lulling you deeper into comfortable stillness. As warmth falls across your shoulders like a soft wool blanket, acknowledge the day's journey, from starlit mountain shrines to humming laboratory lights, from digital Quipu revivals to vibrant Andean plazas. Let each memory fold into itself, smoothing rough edges, leaving only serene whispers in their wake. Your thoughts may drift perhaps to candlelit plazas or woven tapestry shimmering under neon, but allow each image to float away like a feather caught on mountain breeze. Your breath is the final knot tying today's story to tonight's dreams. With each exhale release, any lingering tension, shoulders unclench, jaw softens. Fingertips twitch and relax. Drift, unburdened into a place where Quipu's gentle pulse resonates in the quiet of your mind. There is nothing left to do but rest, held in the gentle loops of history, swaddled by the mountain's quiet grace. Soon sleep will claim you, weaving you into its own tapestry of dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.